kind of seems like more of just like a band-aid over the root issue, which is you're not really good at managing your money.
You didn't get into that credit card debt overnight. You're not going to get out of it overnight.
They don't have an income problem. They just have a spending problem.
Just because you're moving the debt to something else doesn't mean it's a step forward. Welcome to Just Another Money podcast with your hosts, Lauren and Nick. We're here to take real-world money situations and break them down into actionable steps you can actually use.
Whether you're budgeting, paying off debt, or saving for your future, we're all about making finances easy to understand and putting you in control of your money.
All right, well, before we break into all the juicy money talk, we think it's important for you to know who we are, where we've been on our own financial journeys, and why we're so passionate about helping you take control of your money. So Nick, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm married. My wife and I, we actually just got married a few months ago, but we've been together for going on 8 years now. And we actually started dating back in college. But I remember right after graduating, I jumped straight into the world of freelance media. And having come from this big background and doing CrossFit and going to the gym all the time, that's really where most of my clients revolved around. And I distinctly remember that when I was wrapping up projects for clients, when that money would hit my account, I really had no idea what I was doing with it. And there was no plan in terms of how much I was saving, how much I was spending, or what I was even spending that money on. And it really started to bother me that I just didn't feel confident when it came to managing my money. And so I decided that if I wanted to not only be a successful freelancer, but if I wanted to be successful with my money in general, then I really owed it to myself to learn as much as I could about managing my money. So I spent probably the next year or two really diving into the world of personal finance. And I started to develop this plan for myself for how I would get out of debt, build up an emergency fund, and ultimately get myself to a place where I finally felt confident with my money. And fast forward a little from there, I had started helping some close friends and family who wanted to gain that same sense of confidence with their money. And as I started to work my way through this network of people who I knew personally, I realized that I had a real passion for helping people with this stuff. So I started offering financial coaching as a service, really to anyone who is looking to go from this place of fear and anxiety with their money to a place where they finally felt like they had control over it. And, I've been honored to work with people from really all sorts of backgrounds, from individuals to couples, anyone who was looking to gain that same sense of confidence that I was looking for. And, I still tell people to this day that I get excited when it comes to, I guess, the nerdier parts of personal finance, right? Things like building out spreadsheets or tweaking a budget. So I'm really excited to share everything that I've learned, but I guess also continue to share this journey that my wife and I are on. We're looking to buy a home soon, to potentially move out of state and start having kids. And all of those things are going to affect how we manage our finances. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to share how we approach that, but that's a little more about me. Lauren, do you want to share who you are and how you got started in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I first want to start with, I didn't always know about money. I grew up in a low income household, raised by a single mom. We had the essentials, but there wasn't much room for, much else. Fast forward to me graduating college and doing the usual, having student loans, getting a job, buying a car, playing that payment game for a few years. I can afford it if I can make the payments, right? And then naturally, society tells you must buy a home, right? So that was going to be my next step. But it just didn't feel right with all the debt that I had. I specifically remember going to Google and searching, should you buy a home with no money? Because at the time I didn't have much in savings. And of course, had a bunch of debt. And the answer Google gave me was a very clear no. So I spent the next 3 years paying off all of my debt, learning about my finances. And in total, I was able to pay off $52,000, making just about $50,000 per year. My then boyfriend and now husband did the same thing, and we were married debt free. And then ended up buying a home together when we had more in savings and were more financially sound. But during that journey, many of my friends and family members, approached me curious about how I was managing it and paying off all of my debt. And that's when I discovered my passion for coaching others in their financial literacy journeys, because I began helping them take control of their income, their debt, and their savings. And today I'm proud that I've empowered so many women to take charge of their finances and really achieve, their money aspirations. So yeah, that's a little bit about my journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to give people, I guess, a little context for how you and I met and how this podcast got started, This was probably towards the end of last year that we had gotten connected over social media, and seeing that we were both financial coaches, we decided to get on a call with each other and see if we could offer each other some insights or some pieces of information for how we approach coaching, how we approach money. And we really hit it off on that first call. And so we decided to continue these calls monthly. And I think we quickly realized that we shared a lot of the same values when it came to money and helping people work through their own money habits. But we're also different enough in our approaches that we could offer, I guess, unique perspectives to real world situations. So we decided to create this opportunity for us to have longer form discussions and really break down some real world situations about money. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about how we started this podcast. But did I miss anything, Lauren?
Nope, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say we were a little burnt out on, keeping up with the social media feeds. And so this podcast is just a really good opportunity for us to, express ourselves and our creative sides while also being able to make a big impact for others. So, well, I think that's enough about us. Let's get into today's topic. So today we're talking about debt. We're going to dive into situations from credit card debt to debt consolidation, and we'll give our perspectives on it. So let's jump into the first situation we have. So this one is titled, I have $20,000 in credit card debt, and I'm looking for the best way to realistically pay it off. So it says, I have $20,000 in debt over 4 credit cards. My minimum payments range from $140 to $280 per month, and the interest rates are all above 20%. I'm currently working full time and make about $2,500 a month, but my expenses are only about $900 a month. Would it be a good idea to get a loan for debt consolidation, pay everything off, and then pay off that loan, or just tighten my belt and pay off their credit cards over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some initial thoughts with this, like, I think it's really fun when someone that switch finally clicks for them and they, I guess, become aware of their situation a little more. And especially if they're in credit card debt, they start to get excited about pulling all the numbers together, right? Like, what are my minimum payments? What are my interest rates? How much do I bring in? What are my expenses? And I think that's really awesome, but I do think it's important to take a step back first, right? We have to figure out, how did you get into this debt in the first place? Now, typically with credit card debt, we tend to see it happening one of two ways. And that first way is usually like some sort of one-off emergency or a series of emergencies where you just didn't have the money set aside to handle it, so it just had to go on a credit card. And then the other option is, let's say this debt just really comes as a result of these bad money habits, overspending, not looking at how much you're spending in relation to how much is coming in. And when we compare those two, the one-off emergency, we at least know how it happened and we can make a plan for how to deal with it in the future. But when it comes to those bad money habits, I mean, if we could just click a magic button and wipe out this $20,000 worth of debt right away, chances are you'd probably end up in the same spot again in just a few years. So before we make a plan for how we're going to tackle this debt, I think we need to make a plan for how we're going to tackle these money habits first. Make sure that we're addressing those so that we don't start to hinder any progress we start making. But that's kind of my initial thoughts. What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of people in these situations with debt, they really would just want to, what's the quickest way to pay it off? Should I get this loan? Should I do this? And they really think that they're doing something when they are switching the debt around. Really the best way to approach this is to just take your time and actually focus on a plan to get it paid off. But, there's a few options here. The person mentions debt consolidation. There's a few different things they could do. An option is to do a balance transfer card, one of the 0%. Of course, if you were in a debt payoff journey and you're going to actually pay these off, we don't just want to move things around and then rack up more credit card debt. Something else you could do, a personal loan, something like that to consolidate, get lower interest rates and have one payment rather than a few different ones on the cards. Or a debt consolidation company that manages it for you and you pay them, one lump sum for it. So those are a few options that this person could look at here. But again, just because you're moving the debt to something else doesn't mean it's a step forward. It's literally just making the interest rates a little bit lower for you and helping you get a start on it, but you have to keep going. It's not paid off at that point. So that's my initial thought on it. You have to at least pick an option and just stick with it. It's not going to be a really fast approach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, when it comes to debt consolidation, I think a lot of people see it as a step forward when really it's kind of like a lateral step, right? You're not really making progress, but you might be repositioning yourself to move forward in a better way. So yeah, I think that can be a good option for some people. But to address the second part of that question, should I just tighten my belt and pay off the credit cards over time? Well, let's say you went down that option. Typically with paying off debt, we're looking at one of two ways. There's the avalanche method or the debt snowball method. And you're either organizing your debts in order of lowest to highest balance or from highest to lowest interest rate. And, I think there's some rules of thumb that we can keep in mind here, right? So we don't have all the details on the debts, but if all your debts have a similar interest rate but varying balances, then we tend to like to use the debt snowball. But if all the debts have a similar balance but varying interest rates, then that could be a good opportunity to use the avalanche method. So, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we should clarify a little bit more about the debt snowball and debt avalanche for people that don't know. So debt snowball is really focusing on the smallest debts first, regardless of the interest rate. So listing all of those out and just tackling that first one while making minimum payments on the rest. And then the avalanche is a little bit opposite. So you take all of your debts and list them by their interest rate, regardless of how big or small the loan is. And you attack that one with the highest interest rate first while paying minimums on the rest of those. And then you just sort of go through them while they're paid off. But in this situation, this person has quite low expenses. They're only spending $900 per month, which is, I'm guessing they're either living at home or living with like a roommate type situation. So they have some things to do here. That looks like they have an extra $1,600 a month to be able to spend and put towards this debt. And if they could make a big, dent in this, if they actually, build out a budget, get clear on their expenses, try to make a little bit more income, because if they're only making about $2,500 a month, that's probably about $15 an hour. So focusing on bringing that income up and being able to pay that debt off a little bit faster. So that's really the overview there of the situation.
Yeah. So in terms of okay, these are your questions. What do we recommend? I would say, before we put in place any plan to pay off debt, it's really important that you set yourself up for success, right? And so we want to make sure that we're saving up some money in advance of starting this plan, so that if any other emergencies come up, there's nothing that's going to derail you from your plan, and you're not going to fall deeper into debt. So typically, before you start paying off debt, it's a really good idea if you can just save up maybe 1 month's worth of expenses as a starter emergency fund. That way you can start your debt journey. If any emergencies come up, you're covered, right? But from there, I would really focus on going down the route of just paying these debts off one at a time. $20,000, not to downplay it by any means, right? Like, this is a significant chunk of money. But there's people with close to $100,000 worth of debt where maybe debt consolidation would be a better route forward. I'd say with $20,000, based on the income that you're making, and especially if you're able to increase your income, you could probably get this paid off within a year. And so it might be worthwhile to just focus on, let me organize these debts according to the avalanche method. Let me organize them from highest to lowest interest rate, and then just start knocking them out. So as much as you can put towards those debts on a monthly basis, making sure that you are budgeting effectively, that you're tracking all your expenses, so that you're putting as much money as you can towards these. And then once you get that first debt wiped out, rolling that minimum payment, all your extra money into the next debt. That's kind of where my head's at. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope. I think that is kind of sums it up nicely.
Cool. Yeah, let's jump into the next scenario. So this one is titled "Living Paycheck to Paycheck with Credit Card Debt. Please help me." And so this person wrote, "I have over $22,000 in credit card debt and $75,000 in student loans. My student loans are under control for the most part, but my payment is $504 per month. I work as a diner server and make really good money, steadily $50 to $85 an hour, but I can't get past paycheck to paycheck. After making minimum monthly payments on my credit cards, rent, student loans, and groceries, I'm left with nothing. I've totally wrecked my credit and the stress is killing me. I could possibly go to a family member and ask for a loan, but I don't really want to put a strain on our relationship, and I'm so ashamed of my financial situation that I don't have the courage to ask. Any advice on how to get out of this? I've considered bankruptcy, but I was told by several people that I either make too much money or that my situation isn't that bad. I could hustle and pick up side jobs, but I just don't know. What are you thinking, Lauren?"
Yeah, so this is a situation that I think many of us can find ourselves in. It's just a little bit messy. So this person makes really good money, making between $50 and $85 an hour, that is a minimum over $100,000 per year. So the 22,000 in credit card debt, that they're a little bit stressed about, like student loans, they're not so concerned about. They're making the payment, they're making that get by, but it's the 22,000 in credit card debt that they're worried about. So my initial thought was, bankruptcy is probably not the solution for them. I think they really need to get an understanding of their spending. Because if you're making over $100,000 per year, you probably shouldn't have 22,000 in credit card debt, right? You should have an emergency fund set aside, and you should be living off of a budget so you know exactly where your money is going. This just seems a little messy to me. I think that, this person is scared, and they're obviously asking this for a reason, but I think that they don't really have an income problem. They have a really good problem in that they have a great income, but they just have to figure out their expenses and their spending. So that's kind of where my head went initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it sounds like they don't have an income problem. They just have a spending problem. And typically what that comes down to is that this person probably isn't budgeting. And so I think to get this person on track, the first step is we got to make a budget, right? And so when it comes to creating a detailed budget, we really want to make sure that we have a plan for every single dollar worth of your income. And so what I like to do is especially because this person said that their income can kind of fluctuate. I'm sure that's dependent on tips and that, but list like your monthly average income at the top of the budget. And then from there, you're just going to write down all of your expenses for the month. Now, I always like to prioritize the most important expenses at the top of the budget. So things like utilities, food, housing, and transportation. Followed by maybe those debt minimum payments to make sure that those are getting covered, and then any other important monthly expenses that you have. So things like internet, phone bills, any health insurance, things like that. By the time you get to the bottom of that list, like if we're really focused on paying off debt, there really shouldn't be any other additions to the budget. So things like going out to eat or entertainment, like if you're really stressed and like you said, if this debt is like killing you, we're cutting all those from the budget and making sure that every single dollar that we can possibly put towards that, like that's where it's going. Yeah. And so, like I said, just really getting rid of all of that discretionary spending.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with someone making over $100,000 per year, $22,000 is not that much. I don't want to downplay it because it is a lot of credit card debt, but at the same time, this person could make a big dent in this by just buckling down a little bit and paying this off. Now, like the other situation, and we're probably going to say this a lot on here, but they could consider a consolidation like a loan or a 0% transfer card, but I hesitate to suggest that for this person if they're not serious about getting out of debt. Because the last thing you want to happen is the person transfers it to a loan or a 0% card and then just thinks they've done something, they've paid off the debt, and then they get in more debt. So getting on a budget and having a plan to pay off the debt is the move forward to actually see some progress with this debt situation. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, especially in this case, it doesn't seem like bankruptcy is really going to be like a long-term solution. It kind of seems like more of just like a band-aid over the root issue, which is you're not really good at managing your money, right? Like if you're making over $100,000 a year and you find yourself consistently putting expenses on a credit card and someone says this, there's too much month at the end of the money, right? Like you get to the end of the month and you just don't have enough money to cover your bills. Chances are there's probably some holes in your budget of where you're just not spending correctly. And so if we don't really acknowledge and create a plan to address those bad spending habits, like this bankruptcy, it's not going to just be like a magic button to erase everything. Like it's going to stick with you for several years beyond that. It's going to have some consequences in terms of applying for housing, applying for loans in the future. But you really got to address those habits, because if you just were to wipe out this debt, you're probably going to end up in the same spot if you don't deal with them first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to wrap all of this up, I think our recommendation is pretty much similar. First off, I like to say, take a second and breathe. Don't shame yourself, because this person had a lot of shame in their question. You're asking for help. So that's the first step. So just understand that you're going to make decisions that are better for you moving forward. Assessing current spending habits, getting on a budget, and prioritizing debt payoff. This is what this person needs to do. Create a debt payoff plan and stick to it. It's going to take some time. Again, this is not something you didn't get into that credit card debt overnight. You're not going to get out of it overnight, right? After a few months, you'll start to see some progress. And I think that can really help you keep on the path forward. And then of course, focus on paying off their credit cards first while, continuing to pay your student loans, but really keeping that probably the $504 a month payment while you're trying to get those higher interest credit cards paid off. So that's really a recommendation there. Anything you have to add to that, Nick?
No, I think that's a great plan. Like this person said, like the student loans seem to be under control for the most part. Like I think that $500 monthly payment, that's pretty high. But if you're making $100,000 a year, if you can wipe out your other debts and keep your expenses pretty low, like that's going to be super manageable. So really focusing on those credit cards first, I think that's going to be the right play here. But let's move on to the next one. This next scenario says, should I take out a loan to pay off my credit card debt? And this person wrote, I have about $10,000 in credit card debt and my payments are around $300 per month. This credit card was taken out due to an emergency and needing the funds immediately. Then I had a baby, and of course those costs got put on the credit card because of the 0%. I was contemplating doing a debt relief program, but I'm still unsure. I'm not having a problem making the payments, I just want to tackle the debt faster, but it's hard with only making the minimum payments. I'm curious if it's better off to just chug along as I have been doing and dealing with it, or if I should do a personal loan to see if I can get a lower interest rate. My spouse and I are doing this snowball method, but this credit card is the largest debt, so it's only minimum payments. The interest is killing us.
Yeah, so this is similar to one of the other situations we talked about, where the credit card debt, typically accumulates in one of two ways. In this case, the $10,000 of debt is from a one-time emergency and then having a baby. So there's a few unknowns that could change the first step that we take. What's the household income here? We don't know the answer to this question. Do you have any other debts? What do you have an emergency fund in place now, right? Because we know that 10,000 came from an emergency in the first place. So do we have something in place now in case there is another one in the future? For me, first thing is, if you don't have an emergency fund in place, make that priority number one, especially with having a baby. So at least 1 month of expenses there put aside so that you do not need to take on any more credit card debt in case of an emergency, which we know it's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when, right? So I don't think a debt relief program is needed here for a $10,000 credit card. Again, we don't know income and all this stuff, but it seems as though they're actively paying down their debt. So they just need to keep on keeping on, if I were to suggest something.
Yeah, absolutely. And they mentioned doing that this person and their spouse, they're doing the snowball method. And it maybe sounds like they have other debts with the credit cards because that credit cards kind of seems like it's on the back end of that snowball method. But if the interest is killing you, it doesn't really seem like the snowball method is maybe the best approach. And so if you and your spouse are both bought in on this plan and you're working it together, I would say let's shift around the order of which you're paying off your debts, right? Let's focus on that credit card first. Let's knock out the highest interest. That's going to help you overall lower your monthly payment, lower how much is going to interest. And then you can focus on those other debts. I just don't think that the snowball method is the best option here.
Yeah. And like they had mentioned, again, I'll say this a million times. I don't mind a personal loan, alternative to this to avoid the higher interest rates, but just know it's moving debt around. They're not paying off their credit card, which is what I think a lot of people think when they do that. Again, I'm also going to say, make sure your emergency fund is in place first, or you'll be back in the same spot with that credit card debt.
Yeah. So priority number one is get that emergency fund in place. I would say with a baby, like 1 month is kind of the minimum of what you should save up, just because there's really some unexpected expenses that could come up there. But beyond that, like let's change your plan from going from the snowball method to the avalanche method. I think that's going to be a lot better of an approach for the debts that you're dealing with. Like anytime we have credit card debt, typically focusing on those ones with the higher interest first, I think that's going to be your best approach. But yeah, that's all I have for this situation. Yeah,
me too. All right, let's jump into our last situation for this podcast. So this one is, this is a good one. And the title of this one is Repaying Debt with a 401k Withdrawal. It says, I know this is a very controversial topic, but figured I'd just see what everyone thinks. I'm contemplating withdrawing from my 401k to pay off credit card debt and remaining student loan debt. I'm currently 34 years old, earning $130,000 base pay and $15,000 yearly bonus. My 401k balance is $308,000. I have about $15,000 in total debt. $10,000 is credit card debt and $5,000 is subsidized student loans. I'm considering withdrawing $22,000 from my 401k, which covers the debt payoff, a 10% penalty, and a 20% tax retainer. Here are a few pros and cons about withdrawing that I've thought about. I have a good balance in my 401k, and I can normally contribute about $15,000 per year. I know I've lost compounded gains, but there are risks to not realizing those gains as well, like death before retirement or market crash upon retirement. I'd like to set myself up for a condo purchase in a year, so I'd like to have minimal debt. What should I do?
Yeah, I mean, first off, at 34 years old with $308,000 in your 401k, like I think that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
Now, withdrawing from that to pay off what seems like a pretty low amount of debt, especially in relation to your income, your yearly bonus, like it just doesn't sound like it's a good idea or that it's worth it, right? I mean, there's really only a few cases where I would say pulling out from your 401k is worth it. And like, that's if like if bankruptcy is the only option, well, okay, maybe we can pull from your 401k. That way we don't have to go through the whole process of bankruptcy. But I mean, $15,000 if you're making over $100,000, if your yearly bonus itself could pay for it, just doesn't seem like it's the right option, like the right choice to move forward. And so I actually plugged in some of these numbers into a compound interest calculator, which if you haven't used one before, it can be really exciting to see how your money can grow. But if we plug in this $22,000 and let's say they invested it from the age that they are now, 34 until they're 60, and we use an average 8% return, like this could turn into over $160,000 by the time they hit 60 years old. Now compare that to the $22,000 or the $15,000 that they want to pay off today. And it seems like maybe they are motivated by wanting to get into this condo soon. And like, maybe there's going to be some quick decisions that in the long run probably didn't set you up for success. Like I would take your time with this and really, prioritize just paying this off as quickly as you can, of course, but I would not touch that 401k. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. This person's making so much that I feel like the $15,000 in debt is really so small. So they could really take their monthly income, again, get on a strict budget and see how much you have left over. Cause I bet after, some fun money or, eating out, things like that, they probably have quite a bit that they can throw at this debt and they could probably pay this off with that amount of income. They could probably pay this off like in like 6 months or something, if they really, got on a tight budget and wanted to prioritize this, which it seems like they do. I would never consider touching a 401k for this amount of debt with this person who has such a high 401k balance and such a high income for being only 34 years old. So yeah, I think we just need to focus on not doing it super quick by just paying it off with one, 401k loan, but rather just creating a plan, whether that's 6 months to a year. This person is out of that debt within the year, and then they can start, saving for their condo and purchase it. Within 2 years, they've accomplished all of this. So I really don't think that the 401k loan is necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this person mentioned something that I feel like you hear all the time on social media when it comes to like, hey, you really should be saving for your future. It's like, well, I could die tomorrow. Or let's say I do save up this money and by the time I hit retirement, like the market crashes, it's just not worth it. Like I should spend my money and live today. And I think if we kind of live in this mindset of like, I could die at any moment, like, okay, cool. Then you can kind of justify any bad financial decision. The truth is you're probably not going to die at any moment. Like you're probably going to reach retirement age and you're going to miss that $160,000 that you lost out on just because you wanted to jump ahead 1 year, right? Like 1 year to trade all that money just doesn't seem worth it. So like you said, I would just slow down a little bit, make a solid plan. And like, you don't necessarily have to be completely out of debt before you buy the home. Like if your priority is buying the home, cool, let's make a plan to where we can work towards both of these simultaneously so that by the time you do pay off this debt, maybe you decided to go a little bit of a longer route, but by the time you get there, you've already also saved up enough money to get in at your condo, right? Like you can kind of manipulate this plan to whatever your goal is. I don't think you need to jump the gun, withdraw money from your 401k. I mean, you're losing a bunch of that to taxes anyway and to penalties. Like it's not a good idea. Any final thoughts, Lauren?
Nope. Just that if this person at 34 years old can have $308,000 in their 401k, they can quickly pay off this debt. No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all the situations that we have today. And that wraps up this first episode of Just Another Money podcast. But If you enjoyed today's episode, just one simple ask, if you can leave a review and subscribe, like that would be a huge help. And if you thought that this was a valuable episode, some valuable information, the best way that you can help us grow is by sharing this with a friend.
Yeah. And if you want to have your money questions answered on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagrams, which will be linked in the podcast notes. And don't forget to join us for our next episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.